Thank you very much, Scott. Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to another webinar of the Spinal Cord Injury Community of Interactive Learning Series, or Alberta SCILS. Our webinar today is about, oh, where is the title? I think we forgot to put a title in it. So, but as you know, the webinar today is how can a person with a spinal cord injury, a physiotherapist, and an exercise specialist can collaborate and improve the life of people with SCI. So we put this webinar together especially because we perceive that there is a big gap in knowledge and a big gap on in terms of what is possible to do once you're out there in the community, and specifically for the roles of physiotherapists in the community and the roles of exercise physiologists and exercise specialists. So I'm really excited about this conversation that we're going to have. I'm really happy to have these three amazing people joining us to sparkle this conversation. My name is Adalberto Loyola Sanchez. For those who doesn't know me, I'm one of the physiatrists working at the Glen Rose Rehab Hospital in the Spinal Cord Injury Program, and I'm part of the core team of this Alberta SCILS initiative. So let's go, before we start, let's go with some local issues here. So well, I forgot how do you say that. So some housekeeping issues. So the first one, to remind you, all of you, that the rehabilitation advice lines from Alberta Health Services continues to be active. So if you have any issue in terms of, if you live with a disability and you have any issue in terms of changes in function or any concern, you can use it. The disclaimer that these webinars do not substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. And if you find any of the comments or the content of this webinar inspiring enough, please contact your professional practitioners. Also, this webinar will be recorded and will be made publicly accessible to everyone. So just that. And as you know, everyone is going to be muted for the first part of the conversation. Then, as we will have a presentation, in this case, it's going to be a dialogue between our star presenters. If you want to participate in the conversation after that dialogue, you can either request to speak by raising your hand in your window, or by just trying to unmute yourself and speak when you're called on. We will monitor the chat box for any questions, and if you're also experiencing some technical issues. And there will be some questions appearing throughout the discussion at the discussion period at the end, so we can get information of who is attending these webinars, and we can continue improving. And of course, you can change your name and keep your video off during the webinar. So now let's move on to the important piece, which is, let me present you our stars of the show, and then let's continue with the dialogue. So our first star is Sierra Roth. Sierra is a kinesiology graduate from the University of Alberta, who also has her personal training certification with the Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology. Her passion for movement has continuously been explored throughout her life. Growing up, she played soccer, participated in cross-country running, competed in track and field, played volleyball, and raced motocross competitively. After sustaining a spinal cord injury at the T6 level during a motocross race at 16 years old, she was forced to rediscover her love for movement. While attending university, she began participating in wheelchair track and has recently transitioned to para-rowing in the next-gen space with Rowing Canada. She has also been involved in research projects and countless recreational summer jobs, getting children and youth with and without disabilities more active. Her most recent achievement was being the first woman to compete in the first adaptive mountain bike series in British Columbia. this past summer. Her passion for movement in all forms stems from her own challenges with rediscovering movement in a wheelchair. She wasn't properly taught how to work out from her wheelchair and was forced to find a way that worked for her in the small town she grew up in. From exploration and a solid knowledge base in kinesiology, she hopes to pass this knowledge and passion on to others so they can live a happy and healthy life just like everyone else. She does this proudly as a youth coordinator at the Stedworth Center Active Living Alliance for Canadians with Disability. So as you see, Sierra is very well positioned to be a great contributor for this conversation. Then we have Scott. Scott has been a part of the Stedworth Center for 4 years. He's currently the fitness and recreation manager at this center and directly oversees the adult fitness and recreation, the Free to Be Me, and the functional electrical stimulation program areas. Scott is passionate about creating teams that provide opportunities for individuals with disability to participate in exercise and about educating as many individuals as possible onto how effectively facilitate adapted physical activity opportunities. So thanks, Scott. That's, of course, your expertise will be fundamental. And last but not least, we have Kim Dow. Kim is an assistant professor at Tufts University in the Doctor of Physical Therapy program, which is based out in Phoenix, United States. She was the director of the Corbett Hall Student Clinic at the University of Alberta and treated patients there from 2012 to 2021, and currently works casually at the University of Alberta Hospital as a physiotherapist. She has about 17 years of clinical experience working in a variety of practice settings with people with neurological conditions, which includes, of course, spinal cord injury. So I'm really, really happy to have the three of you here so we can explore this enigma about what is it out there in terms of exercise physiology and opportunities to use exercise to be better and live a better life. So without further ado, I will stop sharing. I don't know how to do this. Sorry, yeah. Stop sharing now, and I'm going to open it off to Sierra, Kim, and Scott. Please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you, Beto. So I just wanted to start off today and start talking a little bit about my story and then get into a discussion with Kim and Scott. So I grew up playing many sports as a super active teenager. And at the age of 16, as Beto was talking about, I was in a motocross accident that left me with a T6 spinal cord injury. And at that time, I was living in a small rural town outside of Edmonton. And during my recovery, we were working towards me returning back to high school. So after 2 months in rehab, which is rather short for a teenager recovering from a spinal cord injury, I was obviously quite a strong athlete. So it didn't take much for me to get back up to speed with living in a wheelchair. So at that time, I didn't think much of it, but I was actually segregated from my peers when I returned back to high school. And instead of participating in gym class with everyone else, I was doing physical therapy with my physios. So they emphasized a lot about educating me on the importance of shoulder health and kept me, strengthening those shoulders. But we were also working on things like floor to chair transfers, something I hadn't quite mastered in the hospital. But we knew my independence was really important to me. So we started building some of those skills that could create that. We also had the opportunity to work on things like walking with my RGO braces that I had made at the hospital. So these skills are obviously super important and are extremely important in my day-to-day now. My shoulders have stayed extremely healthy and I'm able to participate in a lot of recreational activities. However, I wasn't receiving in the community the knowledge and expertise of living an active lifestyle. So I actually became quite discouraged by the lack of options that I felt like I had to exercise or to even participate in recreational activities. Parasport is a very daunting task as there's a lot of complex skills that go along with that. And the fact I just didn't see anyone like me in the community that were being active. So when I moved to Edmonton for university, I began using the Stedworth Center for Functional Electrical Stimulation, or FES. And that's when I kind of started seeing people and what active living meant for people in a wheelchair. And interestingly, I was actually directed to the Stedworth by my physios when I was in the hospital, but I didn't know what was possible until I was in this space. So by coming to this urban setting, I had access to an accessible gym, many sport programs and equipment, exercise specialists who had an idea of what physical activity could look like for me. And at that time, I was actually also studying kinesiology. So I quickly came to realize just how many options I could have if I had been educated on it sooner. So since then, I now work at the Studward Center. I also work with clients online who have similar experiences as me, who are also just looking for ways to be active, gaining resources for them to figure out what being active in a wheelchair could look like for them. And as Pedro also said, I'm now a next gen para rower, which has also been huge for my ability to be outside every day. So having these long-term sustainable goals has allowed me to achieve many things, including being strong enough to go to university and getting around every day, to be outside with friends, participating in recreational activities, to go out and mountain bike, to ski, to kayak, all of those things, as well as the more active I am, the better my mental health is, the more I move, the better I feel, the stronger I feel, and the more I'm able to contribute in my day-to-day life. So with that, I want to pass it off to Kim and ask Kim, could you talk a little bit about what physio looks like for people in the community with spinal cord injuries?
Thanks, Sierra. So before I get into that, I just want to tell a little bit about my experience, certainly as a physical therapist. And so, as Beto mentioned, I have been a physical therapist for about 17 years. Part of my career has been within education, so teaching the students at the University of Alberta in our physical therapy program, and now with Tufts University as well. I've also worked kind of through the continuum of care when it comes to what you would encounter if you had a spinal cord injury. So including acute care hospital here at the University of Alberta, but also tertiary rehabilitation, similar to the Glenrose, and then outpatient as well, or in the community setting there at the Corbett Hall Student Physical Therapy Clinic. So Sierra mentioned, like, her experience is highly reflective of the role that PTs initially play in terms of helping people with spinal cord injury. You know, in the hospital, of course, the main focus is helping people get medically stable, first of all, maintaining whatever range of motion or strength they have, but then hopefully went to tertiary rehab, looking at improving those strengths. But the main focus at that point, especially from a physical therapist stand of view, are those quote unquote functional goals. So the ability to kind of relearn how to move again, but now unfortunately with less strength and likely less sensation, on top of likely a whole host of other associated problems that come with spinal cord injury. So we focus all of our time and our effort on those early functional goals, which can take a long time. If you have a spinal cord injury, you realize it can take 60 minutes in one session just to roll over once, because it takes a lot of effort and timing to plan those movements. And so that being said, the focus on mobility and then transfers, and depending on someone's early capacity or what they show us, maybe standing, maybe walking, and progressing from there. But unfortunately, especially in our healthcare system, where dollars are being reinvested, creatively reorganized to other domains, services can be lacking, and there's always this pressure for beds in terms of people leaving and people coming into the hospital setting. And so people are unfortunately discharged from the hospital at a point where we think they're safe to go home because they can transfer maybe from the bed to the wheelchair or move in bed. But we're not looking from a PT standpoint at that time, because of our resources, at those true goals, the life beyond what a spinal cord injury can initially do to someone, because there is so much more out there and so much beyond those functional, quote unquote, basic functional goals. As physical therapists, we talk about, you should strengthen these muscles and you'll get more as time. We talk about the need to aerobically exercise, maybe even throw in the topics of electrical stimulation and rowing and biking early on during the rehab stay, but that's not, in a sense, the time to start those things, because we're focused on the functional goals. But then we don't always afford people those opportunities once they're discharged home to a rural setting, or where there lacks those resources versus kind of an urban setting when we have more. And so I think that certainly is a huge gap in our system for people with spinal cord injury, and a huge potential for exercise physiologists and physical therapists and anyone with a spinal cord injury to collaborate, work together, then to figure out, okay, we've got maybe those base functional goals. Where can we go next to really improve that overall quality of life? So Scott, can you tell us a little bit about what exercise specialists do for patients with spinal cord injury out in the community?
Absolutely, Kim. So probably the main theme, the main idea would be adapting an exercise program to someone's ability level to get the most out of their program. Sounds very simple to say. In reality, it can be quite complex, but that'd be kind of the main thing that exercise component can do. This part of the journey typically starts with removing as many barriers as possible for that individual. So looking at some place like the Stedward Center, making sure it's accessible, that people are able to access it. So for example, we're on the ground floor of the building. Is the equipment adaptable? So when we're talking about adapting a program to someone's abilities, do you have enough broad range of equipment to do that? Financial would be another big barrier we see, is people may not be able to afford programming. So again, using the Stedward Center as an example, our program would be about a half to a third the cost of something out in the more mainstream community, so to speak. And something as simple as on-site support as well. Is there support? Are there resources on site to make sure that that person could be successful in their exercise program? That could be extra sets of hands to help out when needed. It could take other forms as well. Big thing we find is when people inquire about the Stedward Center is they're unsure what to expect with someplace like the Stedward Center. And by that, I mean, I would tell them over the phone kind of what to expect, the programs we offer, but there's hesitation, and people have told me after coming to the Stedward Center, like, hey, I didn't really know what to expect. I was unsure. Usually we get rid of that barrier by doing a tour. So we have someone come in for a complimentary tour, show them around, and even just seeing the space and seeing the sense of community we have in the center is often enough to ease their concern and say, okay, yes, I can see myself being here. It really wouldn't be any different out in the community as well. If we were, say, at a YMCA or City of Edmonton, I think something like a tour would go a long ways just to kind of alleviate any concerns or uncertainty that individual had. Next step, once someone's more comfortable with the space and has decided they want to come, would be doing a fitness assessment. The fitness assessment, we're absolutely looking at fitness levels. We are also, however, looking at ability levels, because those ability levels are going to help us build that program and have the individual get the maximum out of it. We're going to, of course, look at goals as part of that fitness assessment. And the fitness assessment is also going to inform an entry level into exercise. And so by that, I mean, how do they want to exercise, where they're going to go? Is it doing access or a gym membership, mostly doing the exercises on their own, or is it very like intimate, personal, one-on-one training session with a personal trainer? Is it group exercise? Whatever the case, the fitness assessment is partly going to determine what a good fit is there. The types of exercise someone can do are endless, especially with the right types of adaptable equipment in our space. Something as simple as removable seats on most of our equipment gives the participants choice and puts them in control of their exercises, which is something we would always be striving to do, is to give that individual choice and to empower them to do the exercises in the way that they want to do them. Kim, this has me thinking, from a PT's perspective, what are some other considerations for prescribing exercise to a person experiencing a spinal cord injury?
Yeah. No, that's a good question. I think the first, I don't know if you call it, barrier to address is really that, I've taught our physical therapy students now for quite some time. And so they may get kind of a little bit about, working with patients with spinal cord injury. Maybe they've had that opportunity in their clinical placements. And certainly therapists that then go work within a hospital setting, especially in a tertiary rehab setting, or as a very specific special outpatient neuro setting, will feel comfortable working with patients when they see that SCI is part of their diagnosis on a whole chart of other things that people might be seeing them for. But the challenge with that is once therapists go or leave the school, they might work in the community, whether it's in outpatient care in terms of maybe in a private practice setting, or otherwise. As soon as they see the SCI, if they don't feel comfortable or have that experience with working with people there, they freeze up. And it may be that someone with a spinal cord injury is actually coming to see them for shoulder pain because of the different, obviously, strains that are put on the shoulder. It may be neck pain or upper back pain because of postural issues from sitting a long time. But people kind of see that SCI, and that then clouds their confidence and their abilities later on. And so we need to, as therapists, but then certainly as people say, yes, this individual or any individual has a spinal cord injury. Certainly that does not define them. The body is the human body, and it still has the capacity to improve strength, to improve cardiovascular endurance, still certainly has the battles when it comes to mental health and not exercising. And coming from that perspective, to look at goals collaboratively with the interprofessional team to help someone improve their strength, maintain their fitness, improve their fitness, or even go to a higher level, especially when it comes to Sierra and her desire and goals for competitive sports. I think your point when it comes to making sure that people are comfortable with the equipment that they can exercise with, and having that adaptable equipment available is huge, because there's always that, for even the therapist, right, that confidence or that fear of the unknown barrier that comes into play. So just kind of bridging that barrier where people can actually know what's available to them, how to use it, and are they able to do it with whatever supports are certainly available. I think the biggest thing, especially where PTs and exercise specialists can converge then, is yes, PTs may look at the functional goal and say the functional goal might be being able to go participate in a race, a wheelchair race, or maybe it is to walk or whatever those functional goals are, or get up from the floor. But underlying those functional goals are those basics. Does someone have the strength, the coordination, and the aerobic capacity to do so? So it might be where physical therapists look at the motor control coordination part in conjunction with exercise specialists for the strength and all those factors to in the end achieve that higher goal beyond our base function. Sarah, what do you think about that maybe potential collaboration between the two disciplines and how that could help people with spinal cord injury?
Yeah, so I really see it as a team, and can kind of start reflecting on where the synergy could have existed in my journey. So some of the advantages I had with physio in the community were assisting with some skills that I may not have been able to do while I was in hospital. So things like the Florida chair transfers, for example, but also just ensuring shoulder and other joint health was stressed and maintained during that time, maybe providing relief from some of those things. Right now I work with a physio in the community on my shoulder health within sport, and she monitors me based on how much load I'm putting on that week, and we make adjustments to my plan that week to be able to be proactive in my shoulder health, because I obviously am going to need them for the rest of my life. So that's been something that I've been really stressed with my physio, and also just having the desire, like if someone has a desire to work on gait and having that space to do that and look at that, or help with protecting for osteoporosis, if that means just standing and getting some weight bearing. So things that I could have seen for exercise in my experience would have been things like Scott was saying about building that individual plan, figuring out what my goals are, whether that's being active long term, or whether that was starting to look at participating in sport or recreational opportunities, or just creating the tools so that I'm independent to go into any community gym and kind of know how to navigate those kinds of spaces, and just be given that kind of knowledge to know that, yeah, I could go into any gym. It might not look like what the standard is, but this is how I could adapt to those kinds of things, would be something that would be really beneficial as well. Or perhaps you want to gain access to things like FES to reap those kinds of benefits, would also be something that other people could look at. One thing I always think back to is just not feeling like I was getting that workout in, not getting my heart rate going up. And so having the knowledge of an exercise specialist to help ensure those things started to happen and feel safe in that environment would have also been really, really beneficial. The synergy, I think, can better equip people in avoiding things like secondary complications from a spinal cord injury, protect themselves against cardiovascular disease, promote those mental health strategies that we keep talking about, and allow people with spinal cord injury to just feel like they have control over their health. I think one thing is when you do have a spinal cord injury, you kind of feel out of control of the things that could happen next, and especially when there's things that come up with your health, and it could just help better propel people into that space of feeling in control. When I first transitioned into the community, I had my basic set of exercises to do for my shoulders. I was handed a TheraBand and a stationary hand bike that was kind of positioned in a corner at a wall in the school. And after a couple of weeks of that, I thought to myself, is this really it for me being active? Is this really all I get to do to feel a workout? So when I'm in rehab and I have all these functional goals, I hit those really quick. And then, as Kim was saying, we get transitioned into the community and you're kind of left with now what? Now what is it going to be? And so I think this collaboration could be really important in showing that, if you have these tools, you can dream big and create an active lifestyle with whatever that might be. So to pass it on to Scott, can you tell me how can long-term sustainable goals be achieved if someone thinks they've plateaued?
Yeah, for sure, Sierra. So first and foremost, we would have to identify a plateau. And a plateau would basically be the absence of change. So typical exercise program, we are obviously looking for change in a positive fashion, depending on what we're measuring. So that could be an increase in weight on an exercise, could be an increase in hold time on something, an increase in reps to fatigue, lowered heart rate response to a certain workload, whatever the case. Of course, if there's nothing changing in a program, then that would be a plateau. So once we have identified that there is a plateau, next we need to address it by identifying the specific bottleneck where the participant is stuck. And it could be a number of different things. It could just be they're plateaued on that specific exercise, or it could be there's one specific joint or muscle in that kinetic chain that's stalling out, so to speak. So in terms of how we would change that plateau to move forward, we would either focus on the specific bottleneck. So let's say, for example, it is a specific joint that we think with, say, some different exercises, we could get it so that the whole exercise progresses as a whole towards what their goal is. Or we could change to a different exercise that will achieve the same goal. So sometimes, no matter how much you tinker around with a specific exercise, sometimes just that's as far as you're basically getting at it for now. However, if you switch exercises, then you'll stimulate the muscles, the joints in a different way. And then you maybe actually, after doing that for a couple of months, might go back to the original exercise and find out that, hey, actually, I did increase my weight now doing it, just because I tried doing it in a different way. Out of curiosity, Kim, what is the PT approach to a person with spinal cord injury plateauing?
Yeah, I think, well, if you're talking about improvement, I think we as PTs also need to stop thinking of the term plateau, because people have the capacity certainly to push beyond whatever current block it is. The problem is just identifying that block and then trying to tackle it from different angles to see if we can push through, right? Or push down the barrier. Definitely, I mean, I'm guilty in the sense that from a physical therapy standpoint, when we talk about plateauing, we talk about, is there a change in someone's functional ability, right? In their ability to do, to walk or to push their wheelchair or to transfer with X or YZ assistance or lack of assistance, which obviously would be the better gain. And that brings really important to the question of kind of physical therapy. We know that physical therapy can help with a lot of those functional goals. More often than not, though, people have limited access to these physical therapy services within the community. Speaking from what we do or what we do at the Corbett Hall Student Physical Therapy Clinic, at most people can afford, for lack of a better word, and our schedule can afford for us to see an individual maybe twice, probably a week. And in that twice a week, 30 to 45-minute time frame, we might be looking at functional problems, a little bit of chit chat to catch up and build that rapport. And then certainly strengthening or whatever, conditioning, whatever the person's goals are. But we know from kind of that basic exercise physiology level is that people need that frequency of exercise. And in addition to those parameters of being pushed with the strength that they're using or the type of contraction that they're using. And that right now, at least our system isn't set up to help these people more than once or twice a week. And if people similar to kind of what Sierra mentioned, don't have those resources out in the rural community, or feel comfortable going to a gym or have an accessible gym to go to, then they're not given the proper tools to meet kind of what we understand our base level is for improving kind of that strength and function. So in that case, I think from the plateauing perspective, yes, that's unfortunately true currently right now, as we consider plateau as a functional goal, but we definitely need to change that perspective. Not looking at necessarily plateau, but just a little step or blip, if you want to call it, in that whole journey with a spinal cord injury as we age, for sure. I think from physical therapy as well, from a plateau perspective, we also need to look at preventative issues more. And yes, I think shoulder injury and shoulder pain is widely known. And so there's a lot of focus on that, at least from the PT perspective early on. But we also need to kind of hammer in and emphasize the changes that happen in the metabolic system, changes that happen in autonomic function and cardiovascular function. Because as we all age, those things get likely worse. Very few people actually get better at those things. And patients with spinal cord injury do have that capacity to push themselves, if they want, to improve those areas. It's not just that little arm bike in the corner of a gym that we can resort to, I think. And I think, yeah, just to work together for that overall health and well-being of a person, and in this particular case, happens to be a person with a spinal cord injury. So Sarah, what do you think about this collaboration between PT and exercise phys? How could something like that have made your journey better to achieving your long-term goals? And did you yourself face this issue of kind of plateauing, or someone using that term?
Yeah, I think it wasn't until I was, introduced to the Steadward Center, to sports, to things like sporting equipment that allow me to be physically active with friends, or even just adaptive yoga classes that we see right now with COVID. There's a lot of things that are moved to online at-home workouts. I didn't think there was more. And, this synergy between physio and exercise specialists could have reversed that thinking and showed me that, long-term sustainable goals I could make for myself, things that I would be excited for. Instead of thinking that, I've done all these steps in physio and now have moved into the community, and that's all I really had to work for, and that's all that I really had for goals. I think about, had I had that team behind me, I would have had more control over my health with all the other secondary complications that come with spinal cord injury if I had just simply been moving. Having that feeling of empowerment where I know I can still go and work out and be active and do those things no matter what's happening with my body or whatever is going on. I think a better support system and just being active, especially as a teenager at that time, and just being back in the community would have grown that sense of, I'm gonna be just fine in a wheelchair and these things go on. And just knowing, I think with having that collaboration may have allowed me to feel more confident in that transition. I think often people feel like they're just kind of left out in the cosmos. And so this would have been a great way to, feel like there was some support behind you and have those goals to look forward to. And this, I think, would provide a wonderful support system in the community as people regain things like their image, their health, and their life. And so for both Kim and Scott, I just wanted to move on to some of your final thoughts before we moved on to a discussion with the rest of the group.
For sure, Sierra. So a few final thoughts on my end. there is a need for more knowledge and awareness of community options, and I think your story really speaks to that, Sierra. Hearing you say that you didn't know kind of what was out there, if there was anything out there. The image of the arm cycle in the corner to me is a pretty powerful one, and pretty instructive to lots of people don't know what's out there. And I have heard this from other participants as well, is that they come to the Stedford Center, they really enjoy it, and then just as almost an offhand comment, they'll say like, I really wish I knew this existed, because I didn't know about this when I was released from the hospital, or whatever the context is they're coming to us from. I think another key point would be we should be encouraging a two-way flow between the two professions of, say, PT and exercise specialists. You know, when someone is seeing their physical therapist, it could look like something like the physical therapist saying, hey, like, what options are you looking at in the community? Are you planning to do exercise in the community? From the exercise specialist perspective, it could be like, hey, I've noticed that your shoulder's sore. Have you been following up with your physical therapist to check in and make sure that everything is still healthy there? And I think that way, just by that, each profession pushing and nudging towards the other one, that's how you would create a lot of that synergy. Part of that as well, to build on that, would be communication. Communication is key with the participant at the center of the discussion. So are both sides on the same page with what they're doing with the participant? And probably most importantly is, are they giving similar messaging? Because anyone who has had two different healthcare professionals tell them two very different things about the same situation, they can tell you that's very demoralizing and does not inspire confidence in the healthcare team. So is everyone going to say the exact same thing? Probably not. Should there be enough alignment with what any individual in that treatment team is saying? Should there be enough alignment that the participant is confident that, yes, I'm on the right track? I would argue that's going to be a crucial piece as well. How about you, Kim?
Absolutely. You know, if I could give that thumbs up to what Scott just said, here's what I am doing in that sense. You know, I think communication between certainly the individual who's at the center, seeing the different healthcare providers, as well as between the healthcare providers. So ideally, yes, if we could put, let's say for the U of A, for example, Stedford and the Corbett Hall Student Clinic under one umbrella, that would absolutely be ideal and facilitate that communication. But in instances where that's not possible, certainly having a communication with the person at the center of things to say, what are you doing? Have you considered XYZ? Have they saying? And then making point of the practitioners to have that contact with each other to ensure that they're covering the same points, but not double and overlapping things that don't need to be overlapped, so that we can then cover that broader base towards achieving the goal, whether it's functional or you know, beyond that function that I mentioned in terms of physical therapy. You know, I think at the heart of it is that as a team, we need to work together, take down any egos, and in that sense, those gray areas where maybe one discipline might overlap with another is then actually work together, not to battle each other, but work collaboratively, to seeing what we can do for that person. Because in the end, I think that person's, it's not only their physical health, but certainly their mental health and their knowledge that they're not stuck in the corner with a bike. We can play on that analogy a little bit, that there is so much more beyond that could be available to them if they want it, you know. And in terms of the availability of information, I think when patients or people are originally discharged, for lack of a better word, out into the community, there's a huge, massive information overload when it comes to nursing giving them the information about medications, doctors telling them about these, and here's your follow-up appointments, tons of papers being handed back and forth, the physio saying XYZ. And so, you know, even if the team at that time talks about, yes, the need for exercise and ongoing health promotion and health strengthening for this individual, that message needs to be available and almost hammered down at every level within the community. So making these sites where there's adaptable equipment, when there are practitioners to help with that, just kind of hammering in so people see that it's out there in the community, it's more visible, and that visibility then kind of transpires to hopefully making those changes happen, or that accessibility happen for someone, I think. Sarah, what are your kind of final thoughts?
Yeah, thanks for both of you for having this discussion. I think one thing that sticks out the most is, you know, as an exercise specialist myself, I just think about, like, wouldn't it be great that people see that they can go to an exercise class or any gym or join in with their friends and not feel deterred because they have a spinal cord injury, and have that confidence to just be active. So for people to see that there is truly more to life after a spinal cord injury, and it can be a great one, and you can have big dreams. I just want to share a final little story of my journey. So my big dreams happened this past summer when I spent a week out at the tops of the mountains in BC racing adaptive mountain bikes, somewhere I never thought I would be again. But with a bunch of friends just like me with spinal cord injuries, and stories that have brought us all to the same place, one full of adventure and curiosity about what we can do next from these wheels. And it was last summer where I did race with the guys as the first female to participate in the adaptive mountain bike series, all just because we dream big, and the technology that we're riding is because another guy dreamed really big about what we had and what we could do. And so I just want to thank Kim, Scott, and Beto for being open-minded on this concept, as I believe this collaboration in Alberta could greatly improve people's life with spinal cord injuries and show people that dreaming big is allowed. And so from there, I would like to open it up to the floor. Maybe Beto has some final thoughts before we move on, but thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Sierra. Thank you, Kim. Thank you, Scott. Yeah, I think, as I thought this was going to be a fantastic discussion, and so far, I just wrote notes like a maniac, because it's these are things that speak to me very deeply in terms of my own experience trying to collaborate and serve people with spinal cord injury. So thank you very much. And I really, I have tons of questions, but I rather stop and allow others to just to participate and share with us what are the reflections that you're getting. Do you have any questions? Please go ahead. I'm looking at the chat box. I don't see any questions so far. Is there anyone there who wants to ask a question? Terry, you want to ask a question? Oh, sorry, Danielle.
I have a question. Sorry.
Perfect. Yeah.
I have a question with regards to access to the Edward Center. Do you need a referral, or can you just kind of stop by anytime and see how things are going over there?
Yeah, it's definitely open for someone to come in and check out anytime they want. If one wanted a tour and to hear like more about the center from a staff member, then we'd have you schedule that tour, because there just may not be anyone available. But anyone can drop by at any time just to check out the space. And if they don't want a guided tour, then yeah, poke around, see what you see. And if you have any questions, you can get a hold of me or someone else after the fact too.
And just a quick follow-up with that. You had mentioned one-on-one training. Is that typical, or is that kind of an over and above thing?
Yeah, it all depends what an individual wants. So I mentioned earlier in the talk different entry points into the center. So we would have our three main entry points would be access, which would be very independent with some assistance from, say, a floor monitor if required, just to like set up an exercise, change weights, whatever the case. And then we have group classes that one could participate, and then one-on-one is very much that more focused, like one-on-one experience. And the barrier to one-on-one is it is pricier, whether it's with a staff member or if you're working with a student in the PALS program, it is less money, but it's still more expensive than any of the other options. So And again, some people don't need the one-on-one to achieve their goals. Some people do great just in the group fitness or in the access, depending on what, again, their goals are and how much they want to get out of things.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thank you, Danielle. Anyone? Terry, you wanted to ask a question, or?
I see Pam has her hand up.
Oh, sorry, Pam. Pam, please.
Yeah, I just wondered if, with regards to the FES bike, like 10 years ago, I used it for almost 2 years straight, 3 to 4 times per week, and noticed it did absolutely nothing. So I'm just wondering in the last decade what they've learned, if that it does, if anything at all. Just because I put some pretty good hours into it, and nothing seemed to have come out of it, and it just so I'm just curious about that and where it's come.
Yeah, for sure. So from our observations of the center, we would have participants who would see increases in function from using it, but the more typical tale is a maintenance of status quo, which is oftentimes in itself a very good thing, whether we're preserving a certain amount of muscle mass, whether we're preserving that level of nerve health. That's for most people, that's going to be a very positive thing. So just kind of anecdotally, don't see as many people improving, but do see the majority of our participants kind of staying status quo on things. The FES bike, we only offer twice a week or 3 times a week. Those are kind of our levels of entry to make it accessible to everyone. I've heard that if someone's doing it every single day, then that's when they would be getting more of those improvements. But that's again just anecdotal, talking to people in kind of the field. Does that answer your question, Pam?
Just to add on to kind of what Scott said in terms of kind of the research when it comes to functional electrical stimulation, of course, the individual impact is certainly going to vary based on the level of injury, what nerves are injured, what nerves are left partially innervated, all that good stuff. But overall, as an overreaching thing, FES still remains highly recommended on the clinical practice guidelines when it comes to rehabilitation for individuals with spinal cord injury. There is research kind of in smaller population studies, so not kind of your higher randomized control studies that show that beneficial effect. It could be certainly on strength, but carrying down as well to what Scott alluded to in things that might not be fully visible to kind of the individual, like as they're doing it, is the cardiovascular health piece, along with, innervation to muscles in the lower extremity that aren't innervated by the brain itself, that can help with muscle and bone health that otherwise without FES might not be challenged. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, that does, and that's nice to hear, because I know a few people in the SCI community that I catch wind of them saving money and raising money to purchase an FES bike, and it just makes me concerned that, like you said, it depends on so many things that, should they spend thousands and thousands of dollars on something without knowing if it actually is a good tool for them. So perhaps they should, learn from their PT first or something.
Absolutely. And in the end, it might also be kind of a trial in the sense, using the current FES machines and support at the Stedward or the different YMCAs. And I believe there are other institutions, I don't know quite all of them right now, that offer those services, and seeing kind of the individual body's reaction and your desire to do it. Some people really don't like it in general, before kind of taking that next step and purchasing your own.
Exactly. Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Pam. So thank you for the answers. I just want to complement that with just a little bit of a reflection, maybe a question for you guys is the use of functional electrical stimulation. At the end of the day, it's just a tool to achieve a goal. So the exercise principle is still there. The problem, the difference is that for some people, you cannot activate those muscles the traditional way with your brain, so you can activate them with an external help. However, the whole concept of the loads and all of the things that it depends on the objective that you want to achieve, if you're going to achieve or not. And maybe, Pam, but that was the issue in your case, that maybe your goals were kind of not aligned to for what was being done with FES cycling 10 years ago. Now we know we need to individualize this more and also improve our understanding of how can we measure, change these loads in order to achieve specific goals with the goal, like with the extra help of FES. I don't know, Sierra, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I agree. And I think people have to know kind of what the benefits that they're looking for. I would say from an athlete standpoint, I don't feel like, you know, it's a big cardio session for me out of it, but there's definitely benefits from it. And you just have to know what those benefits are and what's kind of what you're looking for when it comes to those.
Perfect, thank you. We have a comment from Janae. So Janae is a physiotherapist from the rural area, from the Lethbridge area. She works at the St. Michael's Hospital there, I think. And she said, well, she had to step down, but she had a few questions about center allowed visits costs. So how to translate this sort of collaborative service to rural areas in which, if we're talking here about Edmonton, maybe, if we go to a rural area, and I think this touches very deeply with your story, Sierra, the beginning of your journey, but also Kim and Scott, you also kind of alluded that in the point of accessibility and financial barriers. So I wonder, what do you guys think about this question about what do you think this could be applied to the rural area context?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say from the student clinic perspective, you know, fortunately, so I can't answer the question exactly, we weren't limited to a number of visits because it was outside of the public system. So in that sense, we didn't have to abide by a certain visit so long as people wanted to come and were able to pay. That's usually the biggest barrier by any means. And I think that in the end, it comes down to what we talked about, communication and collaboration. So if an individual were not able to afford both services, for example, then it's that communication certainly between the two, and figuring out, I guess, what's the frequency or ratio of visits to either one when it comes down to certainly finances, but what is that individual's goal? And how can we best get to that goal? So in some people, it might mean that the exercise phys actually plays a higher role, or at least in that particular point in time, that exercise phys plays a particular role to gain the strength, the conditioning, however you want to apply it, and then take that gained strength and that gained health towards perhaps quote unquote that functional goal that the PT can address, or that additional retraining of motor control, and vice versa, right? So there might be individuals that may need that improved motor control and coordination before their strength can effectively take them there. And so in that sense, maybe the PT has to take that earlier initial role before later. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I think specifically looking at rural areas is tricky for sure, especially the farther away you get from Edmonton. It's not even really viable to come into the city. The good news is, though, is I would say it does come down to education of those community centers, even in the rural areas. Communication in the sense, like, do they know how to make a gym accessible? So I know, like, for example, right now the Sedgwick Center is doing work with a county that borders Edmonton, and actually we're doing the majority of their facilities accessibility audit-wise and giving them specific recommendations, like, here's the variety of equipment you should have, here's how not only should your fitness equipment be accessible, but here's how your facility, the washrooms, showers, lockers, is a big list of how do we make all of these things accessible. Because really, you have to make the whole picture accessible. You can't just say, like, here's our gym with like specific adapted equipment, but oh, by the way, there's a set of 3 stairs to get into the center, right? Which absolutely does happen. So yeah, I would say just the education piece, letting those centers know what they need to be more inclusive. It's really look at that universal design piece is really a way to help people buy into it. Is that whoever comes through that door, whether it is someone living with spinal cord injury, whether it is someone who's, say, just like a mother with a child in a stroller, it's all going to be beneficial to people across the board.
Thank you. Sierra, do you want to comment anything before we close it?
Yeah, I think since the pandemic, there's also been a lot of resources online. Even myself, I'm training people online now, and so there are options for rural area. And I think there's a lot of benefit of learning from places like the Steadward and taking that to you home and being able to sustain that further on. And whether that's connecting with other people with spinal cord injuries, I think peer support has always been a big one as well when it comes to exercise and learning, what I can and can't do from home. And I mean, there's a lot of things that I've been able to do since the pandemic, just working out at home. So being able to learn those things from other people was also really beneficial.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So I'm aware about the time. As we know, we always have till 1:30 in this space. So I want this to, we will stay here to remain the conversation, but I know a lot of people just take this time for lunch. So I'm gonna ask Scott to put the poll, please, Scott. So people can just please take a couple of seconds to help us understand your experience. And while you're doing that, yeah, so that conversation is quite important in terms of the rural, but also here in Edmonton. So what I'm hearing is that, like I'm hearing, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm hearing that the Stewart and maybe the Corbett Hall in Edmonton could start a collaboration and try to define that fluidity and that process that Kim was saying. Maybe at this moment is the Stewart, at this moment is the Corbett Hall, but we have to communicate, as Scott said, but also with the person in the center. The goals, that those long sustainable goals are in the center. Is that correct? Like I see you nodding. So I want to, before opening up for more questions, I want to ask Sierra about, Sierra, when you mentioned these long-term sustainable goals, can you provide some examples of what do you mean by that? Because I think that's a key piece for people to understand what is possible, right? What is possible in terms of collaborating in this fashion with PT and exercise physiologists?
Yeah, so simple things, like one of my main things is maintaining my shoulder health. And with all of the demands that I put on it, that actually takes quite a bit of work. But other goals, recreational goals, I mean, my friends and I pick a hike, and that's kind of the goal that we work towards on whether I can do it or not. So we look into what I would have to do to be able to do those things. Another goal now is something like mountain biking and being able, I mean, the series run for 3 days within a week, and to be able to do that, that's a lot on the body. So those are some of those things that I'm working on, but also health-wise, again, I mentioned the shoulders, but I have a standing frame. So I work on standing once a day. And that is a sustainable goal that I have to work on every day. And then in sport's endless. I have standards that I have to be meeting. And so that has opened my eyes on how much each week can add up to a whole year of goals. And so if I have a time limit that I need to hit every week, I have a workout that is indicating that metric, and I focus on, okay, this week I need to do this specific workout in so many minutes. And providing those little goals along the way has been really eye-opening for me, to show me that there is way more that I can do in terms of writing goals and how I can set those up with workouts. And I mean, my coaches are really beneficial, and exercise specialists would be really beneficial in creating those goals. But yeah, those are some of the goals. I mean, I have lots of goals, Beto, so I don't know if that answered your question, but they're widespread, and they could be a lot of different ways that you can create goals.
Thanks. Yes, it does. Sorry, Sierra. Thanks. Yeah, that provides me, someone like me who are not in your position, but that see people every day. For example, here at the Glenrose, who are going they are in the first stage of their journey, and I see that that's very, very interesting and powerful for me, because sometimes we forget about that and we say, okay, there are no goals, right? Like the goals is just go home and that's it, right? Yes, my life is going to be different. Yes, my life is going to be bad. Well, maybe because it's not going to be the life that you're living, or the life that I can live, right? So definitely that's very good to know, and to change the chip and say, no, there is a life and a meaningful life. Maybe it's even better than what you had before the accident for some people, and I have seen that, right? So anyone else have any questions? So we have here. So we have a question from TJ Don. I don't know if TJ Don continues here. TJ, do you want to ask your question to Sierra live, or do you want me to read it? Oh, you. Oh yeah, you're asking for a specific advice. Anyway, yeah, TJ, please go ahead. Yeah, please feel free to unmute your microphone.
Or Sarah could just answer his question. He was more wondering a little more specifically, Sarah, on what you do for your shoulder health routine.
Yeah, so mine's definitely sport specific right now. But it's a mixture of things with both lightweights and more mobility stuff, and a little bit of TheraBand work. But I would say the one thing I've had to think about too is that it's all connected in a chain. So thinking about also some neck mobility, some spinal mobility, and really thinking about the balance of my shoulders and my shoulder blades. One thing I think people really often compensate in the traps a lot when they lose some of their core function. And so I've really had to work on doing all of the shoulder routine, whether that's external rotation, internal rotation, things overhead. But really focusing on keeping my shoulders down and not using my traps as much has been a really big one, and starting to use the little core that I do have as a T6 to start using that as balance and not using my in my traps and stuff. So I hope that helps, TJ, but I can definitely go into more details and send you an email if that would help too.
Thank you, Sierra. Anyone else have any questions, comments?
So when you guys, so yeah, I have a comment. And thank you so much, guys. This great presentation you put together here, and see the work that you've done. What would you feel, or what, when you talk about collaboration, especially between PT and exercise therapies, is like, do you picture a facility, every facility having a physio and exercise therapy team? Or do you picture, you know, after you get injured and leave the hospital, having a physiotherapy that like say me with a spinal cord injury, I would have my physiotherapy that follows me for my journey. And so whatever clinic I go to exercise, or even another physio clinic, but I have my, you know, person that is my, I've set my goals with, and they can help guide anybody that I need help guidance with, you know, that kind of thing. So then if I do go rural, I have that access or something like that. What would be the ideal collaboration, do you think?
I think first we got to start off with that communication piece for sure. So similar to how Connect Care is in terms of documentation, rather, within Alberta healthcare system is kind of being implemented, so people have access to different records, for lack of a better word. I think, you know, it doesn't have to be Connect Care, because I mean, there's limitations to certainly what access that any individual practitioner should have for information, but something like that, where no matter where you go, no matter what physiotherapist or exercise phys, probably versus easy, versus chiropractor, and any of all of those disciplines can then see, okay, these are these individuals' goals. Now, what is my role to get this person there? If they're recruiting me or paying me, however you want to call it, as to being part of that team. And, you know, so that, yes, maybe we talked about ideally if we could be under one house, but we know that that's not going to happen. Well, that's going to take a lot of effort to happen in one site, much less if you're talking about across an entire province. So I think starting with that communication, and knowing what to communicate with each other, and knowing what the person going through it and carrying the different loads and talking to different practitioners need to convey from one practitioner to another, I think would be the first step. What do you think, Scott?
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head by talking about communication, Kim. And the nice thing to me about communication is it is universal, Meaning, sure, you could have one mega facility where kind of both exist in it, but that doesn't do anything to help individuals who choose not to go to that facility. Whereas if we are just creating that meaningful lines of communication as the best practice, and gym A has a certain set of criteria to reach out to physio clinic B, then you can make matches all over the place and you can create a truly powerful network. What does that exact information sharing look like? That's, I think, the $1 million question, right? Is what's relevant, what's not. Collaboration is great, but it takes time. So how do we make it the most efficient way possible? Thinking out loud, it could be something as simple as, if I'm sending someone to see a physical therapist, I would send a copy of their exercise program and what they have relayed their goals to me as being. On the flip side, if I'm receiving someone from, say, a physical therapy setting, something as simple as the diagnosis, are there any movements the PT wants us to avoid right now while such and such is healing? That's probably a pretty good baseline. But again, there's so much information the two sides can share. I think that would be the next step, is figuring out what's relevant, because we all have busy practices and aren't going to necessarily have time to go over these like massive charts with 20, 30 pages of information. So that's just a very kind of realistic view on it.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Sierra, do you have anything?
I don't really. I see it as something within the Royal area where we would have to work in that collaboration piece, but I think Scott has definitely identified how that could be sustainable. But even, I don't know whether that's adding someone at the Stedford who works on things like that, where there's a specific person that works on those types of things. But yeah, definitely something that I've been thinking about a lot lately. So thanks, Terry.
Thanks,
Do
Terry.
you think those exercise therapy roles could be like, obviously it's amazing to have clinics like the Stedford Center and different things like that, but on a more broad, like the YMCA across the board, to have, we have an exercise therapist on staff with this kind of equipment so that we can, it's standard and across the board. Is that kind of thing you think is sustainable, or would be a good step in the right direction?
I think very much that's where we need to get to someday. I personally believe you don't need specialists in each of the facilities. You just need a baseline knowledge of adaptive physical activity and how to safely adapt that activity. And now, instead of having to wait on one person at that facility, then any person can see anyone, which would be kind of obviously it's going to take us time to get there, but that's going to be the most powerful thing in my opinion.
That's
Yeah,
the dream.
I also see it. I mean, I know there's conversations within sports that all coaches should just have a level base of how to adapt within their coaching practice. So I can also see that within education of physios and exercise specialists, to have that base knowledge as well, so that you could go to anyone.
Yeah. Kim, anything to add there?
No, I think I agree, and I don't want to keep hammering the.
That's good. Thank you, Terry. Anyone else have any questions, comments, reflections? I do have one while waiting, maybe sparkle more, but all of this, this is a fantastic, this presentation, I feel that had a very strong focus on that scenario, like Sierra, an unremarkable individual who was, let's call it, before the injury, you were already very body aware, right? That means that movement, as you put it, your passion for movement was there before. But then what is going to happen with someone suffers or gets an injury and did not have that from before? So that means this person is facing the situation of learning how to do the stuff that was supposed to be doing before in a different way, And not only that, but motivated and learn new ways to do the stuff that never had done before. So I just want to put that there in your ear at the moment, because there is a question from Danielle. So Danielle, do you? Is that, Danielle, you raised your hand, or it was? No, Danielle, are you there? Oh, sorry, I see your hand in there. So, are you there?
Sorry, it was through my car. So can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry. It was just more of a comment. So I do my workouts at Good Life Fitness, and they've been very good at, like, worked with 2 different trainers, and they've been very good at adapting programs and stuff to me. But I was thinking that, like, if you guys did a webinar specifically for personal trainers, so that anybody who's interested in learning more, I guess, about just the basic knowledge of dealing with somebody with a spinal cord injury, or somebody who's got mobility issues or something like that, then I think there would maybe be a lot of interest in that.
Such a great point. Such a great point. And I don't know, do you have any comments, Sierra, Kim, or Scott, on that?
I think that's a great point to raise. I've encountered a lot of people who, are able to have a personal trainer. And so, I'd be happy to support kind of collaborating with personal trainers, learning from them, and then also answering any questions they have in terms of what PTs do for patients with neuro issues.
Yeah, I think there's a couple organizations in Canada looking at that, some organizations who've started that. So I know that those conversations are definitely starting, but not within specifically a spinal cord injury lens. So something to think about.
Scott, anything else?
Yeah, I think there is definitely potential for something like that. I always like to say that APA isn't necessarily a skill set, it's more of a mindset. Meaning there are specific skills and scenarios where you're going to apply certain things, but mostly the mindset part is, how can I adapt? I said this a few times in the presentation. How do I adapt this exercise to this person's abilities so they can get the most out of it towards their goals? Mm-hmm. And once you truly buy into that mindset and you're aware of any safety considerations, then it truly is this big, blank, awesome canvas that we can paint all sorts of cool stuff on. But it's just empowering people who, say, wouldn't be as familiar with working with, say, individuals experiencing spinal cord injury, like someone in the community, say, how do we empower them to say, like, hey, actually, we can really push this person hard. As long as we're following some basic safety stuff here, we can really push this person hard and creatively find lots of different ways for them to get towards that goal. So yeah, absolutely, there's potential, but I think it's just like changing people's mindsets, which isn't just as easy as saying, like, hey, change your mindset. But if you can actually just empower people that way, I think that's the most powerful way you're going to get results, other than, say, like some workshop that says, like, well, you do A, B, and C. So
yeah, I just know from, like, my experience with talking to both of the trainers, I made them both very nervous when they first started working with me, because they were like, well, can we do this? Can we do that? Like, is that going to hurt? That kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty common reaction that lots of people would have, is that fear of the unknown. So that's where those specific education pieces would come in to say, like, hey, like, this and this would be a bad idea, but as long as you're keeping an eye on these things, then there's nothing really to be worried about here. And again, easier said than done, but what you're describing is a very, very common thing we'd see. I'll just use our volunteers as an example. They always reflect to me that their first day, they're super scared to kind of get their hands in there and do anything, so to speak, because, like, what if I hurt someone? But then very much just being kind of immersed in it and getting those reps is kind of the key, where they get comfortable and then say, hey, I can do this.
So TJ is posted on the chat. I think in a perfect world, it will be great if we could pair newer patients with more experienced, motivated patients as a semi-guided mentorship component to their clinical treatment. And Sierra agreed, right? Sign me up to that. I think that's another powerful thing to help people to become more active. I know that our audience is diminishing by the minute because, of course, this is normal here in the webinar. As we move on towards the end, people are moving on with the days. I just want to make sure that like everyone that is here have the opportunity to ask a question or to make a reflection. Anyone? So we have Rob, Michelle, Pam, Brandis, Ina, Kristen, TJ, and Danielle. Anything that you want to add or ask? I'm waiting the 10 seconds that they are recommended. So 10 seconds, no question, no answer. So just to finish.
Another thank you guys. You guys did a great job and I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. And just like to close it up, that scenario that I told you guys about that person who is not previously motivated to be physically active. How to address that? Do you think is the same journey that Sierra was presenting, or what do you guys think?
I think the beginning, a part of that journey is certainly longer and heavier. You know, some people may not get to the point where they get to Sierra's part of the journey and the road that she started. The focus earlier on certainly would be to kind of see what motivation or lack thereof is, why that lack of motivation is there. Is it a perspective that any healthcare practitioner can widen the perspective as to what's possible? And certainly the degree of possibility is not just physical. There's a huge mental capacity for anyone, for all of us, when it comes to exercise at any level. And so yeah, it becomes more of a conversation to understand the barriers, to see what kind of health changes and behavioral changes are someone is willing and open to. And, you know, maybe initially on, we can't carry them to Sierra's level, but maybe at least kind of plant the seed of the possibility, plant the seed of potential change. And you know, and then unfortunately at that point, it's a kind of a time will tell. It depends on a whole host of factors, the individual, the healthcare practitioners, but socioeconomic factors, other health determinants, all play that role in there.
Yeah, it's Rob here. I just wanted to comment too that Kim, you hit the nail on the head on what I was going to speak to, and that is the psychological piece of the puzzle too, right? Especially for somebody with a newer injury, and we've heard this a couple of times, of empowering that individual and to help them build their confidence, to be able to go into a new setting, a different setting from a different perspective, right? Like they have a different lens. I usually say a different vantage point, right? You're sitting a little lower, things are a little different. And just even going to, say, a public space, a public gym, having all those stares sometimes is a deterrent for individuals, but being able to have them interact in a way where they're confident and being able to go in there. And I speak to this because that's what I have experienced in my past, of being hesitant to go to a facility and just either you know, just being able to ask for a little bit of assistance with some things. For me, that was one of the things that helped me overcome that was actually going to Stedward. Of being able to be there and knowing that the individuals there are experienced. It's I think being with other peers with a multitude of different disabilities helped raise the bar for me to be confident in the fact of, okay, you know what? I can go to Terwilliger Rec Center. I can go to these other community facilities if need be, and that it's okay to ask for a little bit of assistance, right? If I can't raise one of the pulleys. It's okay to be like, hey bud, can you lift this up for me for a sec? And you know what? That being able to overcome that barrier was huge. So I think that's one of the stepping stones for assisting people after injury when they're reintegrating back to their community, right? To be like, you know what? It's really okay to ask for a little bit of help. I know, because I'm stubborn as hell. And, yeah, just being able to overcome that and knowing that it's not taking away my independence, but it's actually increasing it. So yeah, that's the comment I wanted to make. And thanks guys for the great presentation, even though I missed some of it.
Thank you, Rob. Kristen say, I think we will take more support to buy in, but encouraging to dream big and find their goals, passions would be challenging, but a huge help for individuals who need a push and motivation. Thank you, Kristen. Those very, very important words there. So to close it up, Scott, Sierra, anyone else? No, you're okay? Yes, Sierra?
Yeah, I'm good.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Let me just quickly share my screen. So this is find us in social media platforms. As a reminder, we plan to do a post-webinar space. Sierra, Kim, and Scott, you're invited this next Monday at 12, same hour, right? Is that correct, Terry? Same.
Yep.
Yep. If you can join, that would be great. But hopefully, we hope is that more people can join, or at least some of the people here can join and continue the conversation in a more informal way. So I intend to join, but of course, if you have time, that's good. If not, that's fine. But I think we need to continue this conversation, especially because we're saying, I think we agreed today that there is much more to be done in terms of organizing ourselves in this province to improve and support people with spinal cord injury, to have a good and a physically active life, and also utilize exercise to achieve goals that are beyond just doing exercise, right? Goals that are participation goals. So thank you very much again. Great panel, and I learned lots today. And thank you everyone for joining. And of course, those few that remain until the end, thank you. We appreciate your effort. Have a great start of your week, and we'll be in touch. And don't forget to think about next week. And if you have any colleagues, I think that's the other piece, right? Someone said here, well, why don't we do this for kinesiologists or trainers? Yeah, that's the whole idea, that this Alberta SCILS community expands to all of these people that are involved in the lives of people with SCI. And the only way to connect them is through the people with SCI, as Sierra mentioned, right? I am the one who is connected with other people. Let's invite them to join to these forums. So thank you very much, and have a great day, and thanks to the presenters. Bye-bye.